Hello and welcome. This is a short video that is intended to offer information about the budget related to St. John the Divine for the second quarter of 2023. That is the second 3-month chunk of 2023, April, May, and June. Some of you might remember that at the end of 2022, we put together some videos explaining the church's budget situation, and we got some good feedback. And then we decided that a good way to keep everyone in the congregation updated on how budgetary plans are working out, that it would make sense to do a short video every quarter explaining our financial situation. This is that second report, April through June. We actually are recording it on Thursday, the 20th of July, 2023, and are reporting on information current mostly up through the end of June, 2023. My name is Erin Kelly. I'm a member of the Parish Council, and I am joined here once again by our fearless treasurer, David Buckman. And today, David and I are joined by Al Lehmann. Al is a member of the Parish Council, and Al is here in that capacity to ask questions and to raise issues and to get information and make sure that things are explained in a way that's going to be clear for folks.
At the end of 2022, we said, and I quote, "The financial situation of St. John's is serious but not fatal." And now we're after 6 months into the new fiscal year. So I think the first question is that still the case?
I think I have to equivocate here and say yes and no. We still sadly have a very large operating deficit, which was $113,000 just for the 6 months to the 30th of June. So we have been forced to cash in some $50,000 of our investment portfolio on top of 14,000 regular investment income, and also a bequest of 59,000 odd in March. So that's the bad news, that we still have this big deficit. The good news, however, is that in the first quarter, the vestry and parish council agreed to be reducing this operating deficit by 20% per year each year for the next 5 years.
How do we keep members of the congregation updated on financial matters?
Good question. We actually have several ways. The first one is we post a hard copy on the church notice board by the garden door. And if I'm clever enough, I can actually share that with you. And that's the first way we do it. And it's posted pretty much immediately. It's done. And as you can see from the little note at the bottom, it was actually printed on the 7th of July. So it was fairly quick. In addition to that, we also publicize it in a few other ways. The first way we do it is, of course, publish it in Divine Connections, where Bill Hazar will kindly give us a little section there where we can show the same information and make our comments on it. Another way, of course, is these videos that we are doing right now, and we're planning to do those quarterly if people think they're useful. And in addition, we report monthly to Parish Council, who are, of course, responsible to actually monitor what's going on.
Okay, so to get into this second quarter update, generally speaking, what's happened since the end of the first quarter?
Let me just explain this chart a little bit, because it's derived from what we said 3 months ago for January to March, what we've said now for the first 6 months. And if we subtract the first column from the third column, we get the second quarter. And I chose to do this because the pattern, I think, is very clear when you look at the percentage of the budget in each quarter that we consumed or used up. For example, taking the first line, in the first quarter, we reported that we had only got 77% of our budgeted or planned givings. At the end of 6 months, we said we've got only 75%. And what happened was in the April to June quarter, we only had 73%. So that's been pretty consistently between 73 and 77%. Rental income is luckily a different story, where you have almost 100%. And fundraising is another story, which we'll go on to talk about later, because we essentially have not been doing very much. So the bottom line is that our operating revenues, which were 81% in the first quarter, were only 76% in the second quarter, which means that the first 6 months we were 78%. So we're definitely lagging by over 20%. in the income side. The expenses are much simpler because everyone's working to their budgeted expenses and everyone basically is keeping pretty close to it. In the first quarter, there was some shortfall in the sense of some things had not yet got done, but in the second quarter, everyone was working and actually achieved 100% of expenses. So that on average, for the 6 months, we were at 93% of our planned expenses. That had a major impact though on the deficit, because in the first quarter, our operating deficit was actually slightly 1% less than we had planned or budgeted, which was good news. And at the end of 6 months, that's turned to the worse because we're operating now at 136% or 36% over our planned operating deficit. But I think what this chart shows is that in effect, in the second quarter, we had twice our operating deficit that we had planned. So that's why it has jumped from roughly on track in the first quarter to being a third behind, if you like, in the 6 months, is because the second quarter was very bad.
Is this different from what we were seeing last year? And if so, in what way is it different?
Last year was much more even in the sense that we ended up our budget pretty close at the end of the year to both revenues and expenses compared to what the budget was. This year, the big problem, as you can see, is on revenue. In 2023, for example, our giving, as I said, being only 73 to 77% of our budget. And that's the prime cause of our higher operating deficit.
Since the givings are different, it sounds like it would be good to dig into some of the specifics and the specifics of both revenues and of expenses.
In the first quarter, giving fell short by 23%, partly due to a changeover in the electronic collection plate to a new system and teething problems that were associated with that. Have those teething problems been solved?
Unfortunately, no. In fact, our second quarter givings were down by 27%, slightly more, which is the main reason why our revenues are down in the second quarter.
Can you tell us why the teething problems have not been solved?
Our envelope secretary, Jim Harlick, is looking hard into this and has tried hard to get people to switch over. The message I get is that there are two particular problems, one of which is, I would have thought, somewhat trivial, which is that people seem to object to using a system which is actually provided by the United Church of Canada. But more importantly, was that there were 2 times that you could have the money taken out of your checking account. One was the middle of the month, the 15th of the month, and the other was the end of the month. And for people who are on regular payment schedules, I mean, that's great. The new system run by the United Church, for some reason, always takes their money out on the 20th of the month. And for people like myself who are on pensions or people who are working and get paid at the end of the month, that is not a very convenient time. So what we're trying to do is, in fact, diversify the way that people can get money to us. But Jim is still very much struggling in getting people. People are slowly moving over. We got slightly more. Today is the 20th. We got $9,300 in today, whereas last month we only got $9,000. So we've got $300 more. But I mean, that's not changing our needle very much.
The other thing I'm curious about is fundraising. Fundraising was not done in the first quarter. Did we do any fundraising in the second quarter?
Not much. We had one meal which raised about $500 in round figures, and that was added to the $5 that we had made in the first quarter. So we've only got a total in the bank, net of the bank, of $503. However, I'm glad to report the Parish Council has got this message that if we are going to achieve our fundraising objective in 2023, the second half is going to have to be very different to the first half. And as you've probably seen in the weekly e-blast, as we call it, from the office, the Parish Council is looking for ideas for fundraisers, because our total budget, I think we need to make between $10,000 and $20,000 for the year. So we've got some hard work to do in the last half of the year.
Let's shift to talking a little bit about expenses. So David, what is your general sense of how expenses are currently being managed?
Overall, actually fairly well. You still have on the screen the chart that I shared with you, and in particular in the second quarter, the overall expenses were exactly on budget at 100%. This followed a lighter first quarter of 86%, so that on average we were 93% of budget in the whole 6 months. Well, we were lucky in the sense we had two large changes which were opposite. I first talk about our insurance premium. We were warned by the diocese when we were doing our budget back in November, December, that we should allow 30% more for our insurance premium in 2023. Sadly, when the bill actually came in, for a variety of reasons, mostly due to some revaluation in our case, our insurance costs went up by a further $10,429 or 28%. So it's almost $50,000, around $50,000 for our insurance premium. And there's not much we can do about that because our building is now valued at something like $18 million. So that's a reality. The luck came in the sense, although it was sad to lose Stephanie so early in the year, as you know, she left us for Campbell River just after Easter. And we had planned in the budget for her to be, in fact, with us for the first 6 months. So there was an offset after all the dust settled of paying out her vacation and things like that of $8,400 or 27% reduction in payroll. So those two sort of more or less equal and opposite things were the pieces of good and bad luck. But other than that, I think all the departments are following their budget pretty closely.
Let me pick up on that point of salary costs. Salary costs are down because of Stephanie leaving us. Now I'm seeing Craig Hebert and Patrick at church. Are we going to be paying salary costs for them?
My answer, to be honest, is not as far as I know. I can explain that Craig, of course, as you may recall, was recently appointed as our new archdeacon for the region of Victoria to replace our incumbent, of course, Alistair, who has gone on to become a different form of archdeacon. And as normal, if our archdeacon comes to our church, the good news from my point of view was that we do not have to pay for him. If we had another rector come in and take the service, there would have been a $200 or $300 bill. But so don't worry, we're not paying extra for Craig, luckily, because he was just appointed archdeacon. As far as Patrick's concerned, I mean, Patrick's return from Prince George was, you know, his choice and so on, and it's great to see him back. And you know, as far as I know, he's still a volunteer at this point.
So what are we expecting then in the second half of 2023? Are there any specific actions that members of the congregation can take or should take?
I want to go back, of course, to the issue of our givings or people's donations. As I touched on before, what we're trying to do is diversify the way that people can give, because the new electronic collection plate, which is the UCC system, which is replacing our diocesan system, is less flexible and not as convenient for a lot of people, obviously, which is why there's been slow take-up of that. We are working, that by we, I mean the finance team is working closely with the stewardship team. And for example, we have made it, if people send money to my treasurer at stjohnthedivine.bc.ca, that money will go straight into the bank if they want to give, for example, a pledge or whatever. But we have 12 to 15 different ways that people can actually donate. And we want to make sure that by the time we get to the end of the year, everyone is comfortable and using their best and most convenient way of giving their contribution to keeping our operations going. Our problem has been this changeover from the electronic collection plate. This, as I mentioned before, this problem is not solving itself, even though we took the budget in relation to the pledges that people made in 2022. You know, we were not holding our finger in the air and wondering how much was coming. This is based on what people are pledging, but clearly the problem is how do people get the money to us? In the electronic collection plate, or pre-authorized debit, as it's called, which takes money straight out of your bank account, that is way down compared to the other methods. For example, people putting checks or cash in an envelope and leaving them on the plate. Some people give by credit card, some people give by Canada Helps. All these different ways of doing it. I think we need to make sure that everyone understands what their options are, and it's up to them to find, as I said before, the best and most convenient way for them, based on their financial situation. And Jim Harlick and myself will be happy to talk to anyone who has any questions.
I do want to end by thanking everyone watching for their time, and also to remind you that there are opportunities to have your questions answered if you have questions that weren't already answered by what we've presented. It is possible to contact David directly with questions about the budget. That's one of the things you can do with him as treasurer. As well, members of the Parish Council, we are available to you, for you. We can bring questions to Parish Council on your behalf. We can bring information and answer questions if you bring them to us. And all members of the Parish Council are listed on the church website, and we are happy to have people reach out to us by email, to have people speak to us before or after services, to reach out in any other way that makes sense and might be convenient. And so thanks so much for anyone watching, for being on top of the financial situation, for being interested, for asking what it is that you can do to help out. And we look forward to bringing you another short video in about 3 months, reporting on the third quarter of 2023.